Community College District Board of Trustees is now called to order at 4:15. You may join today's meeting in person via Zoom webinar or watch the live stream from the College of the Desert YouTube channel. These links are accessible by visiting the College of the Desert homepage. Roll call. President Armando, please proceed with the roll call.
Student Trustee Robles.
Here.
Trustee Perez.
Here.
Trustee Oden.
Here.
Trustee Kinnaman. Here. Trustee Gonzalez.
Present.
And Trustee Steffen.
Present. At this time, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. If I could have Trustee Perez please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd appreciate it.
Sure thing. Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Place your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Trustee Perez. Next, agenda, confirmation of agenda. Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions to the special agenda for the June 20th, 2024 special meeting? Seeing none, the agenda stands approved as presented without objection. Public comments. Requests to address the Board of Trustees regarding special agenda items. Remote public participation is allowed and will be accepted in person by email to otp@collegeofthedesert.edu during the meeting and submitted for the record or by using the raise your hand function by joining the Zoom link. Pursuant to District Administrative Procedure 2345, each speaker will be allowed a maximum of 3 minutes per topic. 15 minutes shall be the maximum time allotment for public speakers on any one subject, regardless of the number of speakers at any one board meeting. At the discretion of a majority of the board, these limits may be extended. All comments must be submitted or brought forward prior to the end of the public comment section. As an additional note, this item is intended for members of the public who wish to speak regarding special agenda items only. Armando, are there any public comments that we have received?
There are no public comments at this time, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. With that, we will move on to action. Board of Trustees. This is the selection of the CEO search form to facilitate the recruitment of the district's permanent president superintendent. Before we take a motion, I would like to invite the board's general counsel, Jake Knabb, to provide some context and outline the process for this item. Jake?
Thanks so much, Chair Steffen. Members of the board, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I would love to just be able to provide a brief bit of background before we move forward at this special meeting with the presentations from our finalists for the district's CEO search firm proposers. Just to give some background again for the public, as this process has been very public thus far, and I just want to provide kind of a little bit of history of how we got here. So in February, the board at its regular meeting directed staff to issue an RFP and solicit proposals from potential consultants who would help the district recruit and select its next permanent superintendent president. The deadline for responses to that RFP, after it was issued in February by staff, the deadline to respond was in early May. And if you'll recall, we were pleasantly surprised at the overwhelming response that the district received to this RFP. And there were 9 responsive proposals that had been submitted. So at the board's May meeting, the board made a motion, a multi-part motion that essentially approved a screening tool and directed board members to use that approved screening tool to evaluate the responsive proposals. At the May meeting, the board further authorized the board chair with support from HR and the Department of Administrative Services to compile and evaluate the submitted proposals, and then authorize the board chair to select the top respondents based on those submitted evaluation tools from members of the board, and to invite those top proposers to come to a board meeting today, this special meeting, so that they could make presentations related to their potential services and answer any questions that the board might have. As authorized by the board, Chair Stefan did in fact evaluate all of those screening tool responses that had been submitted. And consistent with the direction at the May meeting, we have two final candidates for the district's CEO executive search firm here today to make public presentations and to answer questions. After those two firms make their presentations today and answer any questions that the board may have, the board will have an opportunity to deliberate and select a search firm for the district's superintendent president recruitment process at this special meeting. Happy to answer any other clarifying questions, but that's where we are today. It's very exciting, and I'm looking forward to hearing the presentations from our finalists.
Okay, thank you, Jake, for that synopsis of what's transpired so far in this presidential search. After the presentation, before the meeting, I randomly selected from a drawing, and PPL will present first. Oh, this is loud. After the presentation, the board will have an opportunity to ask questions. Following the presentation, we will have AGB present, and the board will have another opportunity to ask questions before we take a motion and begin deliberations. So at this time, if I could have PPL step to the podium for your presentation, please. And I believe we have a copy of your
Yes, you do.
presentation, so board members, you can follow, review this or look at it at your leisure while they're presenting. Thank you.
Thank you, President Stefan. I am Ben Duran. I'm the president of PPL Incorporated. I have with me two other of my partners who, the three of us would constitute the team that would do the search if PPL were selected. I have Dr. Lisa Sugimoto. You're going to be hearing from her in a minute because she's going to be going through our presentation, and then Dr. David Weyer. And so I just want to thank you for this opportunity to present to you the PPL approach to doing the search. I want to just share with you that we are a California search firm. We're the largest California search firm. We've done, of the practicing search firms in California, we've done more searches. We've done large districts, small districts, rural districts, districts in Northern California, Southern California, and certainly here in the Inland Empire. And as a result of that, we are delighted that we have this opportunity to not only present to you, but to also hopefully answer some questions that you might have at the conclusion of Dr. Sugimoto's presentation. So with that, let me turn it over to her so that we don't burn a lot of our time, and then we're happy to answer any questions that you have afterwards that we haven't covered in our presentation. So Lisa, I'll turn it over to you, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. He had to lower the mic for me, so thank you very much, Ben. And I feel like I drew the short straw, obviously, because I'm short. But let me first say, Board Chair Dr. Stefan, Vice Chair Ms. Gonzalez, Trustees Kinnaman, Oren, and Perez, and Student Trustee Robles, and congratulations on being appointed today. And President Hope, I hope she does be able to join us for a while. And as Ben said, we are delighted to be with you here this afternoon to present PPL's executive search process. And as he mentioned, there are three of us here, and we will be the team that will be supporting you and serving you and assisting the board of the trustees with developing your search process. Current board policy 2431 states that in an event of a vacancy, the board shall establish a search process to fill the vacancy. That process shall be fair and open and comply with all relevant regulations, and that's your board policy. So part of what we'll be doing over this next period of time, if we are selected, is helping you develop that search process. If we're selected, we would want to meet immediately with the board or your designees to develop the search process per your board policy. And we will do so by first reviewing your previous College of the Desert Superintendent President search processes and materials, but we're also going to be reviewing processes that PPL has found successful at other California community colleges, and we'll be highlighting the pros and cons of those processes. We will develop with the board a tentative calendar and a search process to be reviewed by constituent groups, with the board action to approve the search process at the next meeting of the Board of Trustees. In our proposal, you probably saw that we indicated June 20th as a date for the board to approve the calendar and process. However, with the change in the selection of the search firms, if we are selected, approvals of search process and the calendar could possibly be at the next board meeting, depending on how quickly we can get through all of the other processes necessary. So in terms of identifying the required and desired skills and competencies, we find that to be a very iterative process. And in that iterative process, the board members, constituent group leaders, and community representatives will identify skills, competencies desired in the next superintendent president. And after collecting that input with the various groups, a draft announcement will be developed. PPL will develop the draft announcement for the board consideration and your action. Advertising the position, after the position announcement is approved, we will be assisting in the development of the web presence for the position announcement. PPL will provide guidance to probably your IT or your web people on the information about the college and the community, such as specifics about your accreditation. I've looked at your website. You have a nice list of information that probably should be posted on the Superintendent President website. We'd also want to list information about the communities, such as the communities served, certainly businesses and industries that are in the area. All of these items would be helpful to potential candidates as they consider applying for this position. As we conduct our outreach and recruitment, we will assist in identifying appropriate publications. Mostly those would be online, thank goodness, for the advertising to occur. We focus on communication channels to generate well-qualified candidates that will meet the college's profile and your needs. We will intentionally address publications that emphasize diversity and inclusion. And I don't know if you know this, but contacts that we will make them to leaders who are already ready for a position like this and who are looking. But we will also contact those who are ready, will be a good match for the College of the Desert, but may not be actively looking at this time. We pay attention to diversity in all its forms. Some of our recent appointments in our PPL searches, as our consultants do their recruiting, those diverse appointments have been at these various colleges. I'll mention them quickly. South Orange County Community College District, LA Harbor College, Long Beach City College, El Camino College. We also pay attention to recruiting out of state. And in particular, we look at the 7 western states, and 2 of our recent appointments that have occurred are at Palo Verde Community College District from somebody who came from Kansas and Arizona, and also Yuba Community College District from Washington State. So some of you think that we only look at California individuals, but we do attempt to find individuals who are well qualified from out of our state. We will assist the search committee with applicant screening by establishing the roles and responsibilities of that search committee. We will ensure that implicit bias is addressed. We are very concerned about making sure that the committee understands conflict of interest issues and also reminding them about confidentiality and the potential issues that may arise from lack of confidentiality and the legal issues to them personally as well as to the district. We will assist in the development of the applicant screening criteria, which follows the position announcement, and we will then establish prior to the search committee the interview questions. In the guidance and facilitation during the first level interviews, with the interview committee, there will be options for assessing the candidates who they will see in the first level interviews. First off, they will determine the duration of the interview. They will also look at the number of questions they would like to ask, if there's a presentation they would like to hear. Also, sometimes committees want to have the candidates do an impromptu writing sample, just to see how well they write in a manner of so many minutes with a particular subject matter. Interview questions are discussed and established prior to the screening of the applicants and the first level interviews. And of course, part of the committee's responsibility is to determine the candidates to recommend as finalists to the Board of Trustees. What we will be doing as your PPL consultants during those interviews, obviously escorting that candidate in and out of the interviews is important. Will help to keep the time, so making sure that every candidate has the same amount of time, ensuring as much as possible that they can answer all the questions. We will provide the search committee with social media checks at the first level, so they can use those in their determination of who they wish to recommend to the Board of Trustees. And certainly we will assist them in their deliberations as they determine who they want to recommend. Prior to the final interviews with the board, sometimes you will want open forums and maybe site visits. So let me discuss a little bit about that. For open forums, if you choose to do that, we will assist in the promotion of the forums to the community at large, as well as the college community. We will work with your IT folks to do that. We will also assist human resources in soliciting forum questions to be asked of each candidate. So there's some consistency. We will also assist in moderating those forums. So one of us or all of us will be there to assist in that way. Site visits, if you so desired. I will say to you that recently in our searches, boards have decided not to do site visits because of the cost and the time involved. But what we have found that they have relied more heavily on our very in-depth reference checks that we bring to you as a summary report. And so with the final board interviews, PPL will assist you in determining the duration of those interviews. We certainly will discuss and determine the type of interview that you might want to have with each candidate, and that's up to you to decide how that might work for you best. Interview questions or prompts will be discussed and certainly determined by you. And then obviously we will facilitate those board interviews by escorting the candidate in and out and working with them after the interviews, if that means contacting them to let them know if they were the successful candidate or if they were not. Our in-depth reference checks, background checks for the finalists, we do extensive checks and they're only done by PPL consultants. We don't farm out, we don't ask other people to do that, and mainly because we feel we know people that we can call. Calls to anyone who can attest to the candidate's leadership qualities and experience, but particularly we want to call individuals from current and former places of employment. Calls to references on the candidate's reference list and also to others not on the list at times provide us with very different perspectives on that candidate. A summary report that will be delivered orally to the board will be used in your consideration of each candidate that is a finalist. So at this time, I'd like to thank you for listening to our presentation. My co-consultants are here in the search to help you with any questions that you might have, and hopefully we can answer those. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And if I'm reading this correctly, we are not asking questions? Oh, we are.
Yeah, so now would be an opportunity to ask questions specifically of their proposal.
Okay, so as any board member, I'll start on my far left over here. Trustee Perez, do you have any questions you would like to ask PPL representatives?
What role will each one of you be taking throughout the process?
Yeah, we share the roles. There, we have typically one person that we call the lead, only because they are somebody who's been selected to keep us in order. But basically, we share all of the duties that we've just explained with. Any one of us can, and in fact, will be involved in those duties. So it isn't as if one's going to help with the interviews and one's going to be doing this. And all three of us will be full partners in the selection process that we involve ourselves in.
Trustee Gonzalez, do you have any questions at this time? No? Student trustee Robles?
I do not have any questions.
Okay, trustee Oden, do you have any questions at this time?
But first, have you done any work at this college before?
Yes, sir, we did the search for your interim superintendent president. Dr. Sugimoto and I were able to do that search and to bring it to its closure. So we have done work with you folks.
Any previous to that?
None previous to that I was involved in. No.
Okay. If you are in the interview process and you ask questions, people have an opportunity to tell you, give you information based upon the question you've asked. What do you do to draw the person out to tell you about themselves?
The way we do that is to work with the constituent groups, with you folks in this particular case, and with the search committee, when we do questions for the search committee, to develop questions that do specifically what you're asking about, to develop questions specifically about this region, about its demographics, its diversity in terms of socioeconomic diversity and geographic diversity, ethnic diversity, and how much they know. So we'll develop questions specifically that will draw out those. Every district, by the way, the questions that we help develop for every district are a bit different. There are some, obviously, tell us about yourself and that sort of thing, but there are other questions that we develop specifically for the district that we are dealing with. And in doing so, we try to draw that out of them. And because you have to remember, some of these folks are from out of state, some of them from Northern California, and if they've done their homework, it'll show when they respond to those questions.
Trustee Oden, let me also mention that when the finalists come to you, you have an option on the type of interview you'd like to do. You could do a simple question and answer, which is fine. But we also have another way of helping you with a different type of interview, which is more conversational. So it allows you to ask a prompt for the question, but then allows you to continue to ask along the same lines and be able to go deeper. So you're able to then get more information that way from the candidates. And at the finalist level, it makes sense that you should have that opportunity. So, your initial first level interviews will probably just be questions and answers, but questions that are developed to answer the ones that the committee's most interested in and the ones that are driven by your announcement that says these are the things that are important, which all of you will be providing us, the community will be providing us, the constituent groups on the campus will be providing us.
Okay, thank you, because that kind of goes more to what I was asking, asking the type of questions that not only draws the person out, but so they have an opportunity to tell you who they are, because that's what's going to be important to us as trustees, not just their knowledge of the area, but who are you? Yes. And what are you looking for here?
And that process that Dr. Sugimoto just explained to you, where you might pick, instead of having 14 questions, for instance, you might pick 6 or 7 areas that you want to explore in depth about, where as again, there would be a prompt of a question, and then at that time, any of the other trustees could jump and say, I heard you say this, can you tell us more about it? And that sort of thing. So it's more of a conversational interview, but it allows you to drill down deeper into a particular topic.
Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions, Trustee Oden. Trustee Kinnaman?
Yes, I have a couple questions, and welcome. Thanks for
Thank you.
making it to College of the Desert for this presentation. The first question I have is, have you already, I know you're familiar with the college, have you already started developing in your mind potential candidates that you would recruit for this position?
I'll respond, and I'll ask each one of them to respond. Not only have we started doing that, but we've actually had people call us. Hey, when is College of the Desert coming up? And then we say, well, they've got to select a search firm, et cetera, et cetera. And are you guys going to do it? Well, we hope, but we don't know yet. And then saying, so I've got a list, I have a list personally of people who have contacted me from both here and out of state who are very interested in the district. And so, yes, and we also have others, as Dr. Sugimoto was saying, we have a list of folks who are out there, who are ready, maybe not even thinking about leaving, and we've talked a number of people into putting into searches. Say, oh, I hadn't thought about it, maybe I will. And so we do that. So to answer your question, I know I go on and on. Yes, we have folks that we have already contacted, and we have people that we will be contacting. David, anything? Would I do that? Lisa?
We want to make sure that as we reach out to candidates, that we know the profile of the college very well, because we don't want just anybody to apply. Now, we can't tell people not to apply, but we want to go after people who you know are going to really respond and fit into this community and into this college.
You'll tell us the ones that you were going to tell not to apply, right? I'm teasing. So another question.
I don't think I can do that.
Another question I have, some search firms, they use different instruments. There may be behavioral type instruments or other types of instruments to look at whether or not they will be successful in a certain institution's environment. Do you have any of those types of resources available to you that you use?
We don't typically do that because we don't think it's our job to tell you folks who might or may not. What our job is to go out and get really, really good candidates for you, and then develop a process, as Dr. Sugimoto had mentioned, develop a process that is all-inclusive and questions that will get to that sort of a thing, so that you can determine whether that person would work out for you. But do we survey the candidates? We don't have a stable of candidates, nor do we 86 any candidates. We don't say, this person has done this survey and wouldn't fit at the College of the Desert. Everybody should take a shot at it, and if it's up to the search committee and then you folks ultimately, who ends up as president, it's your place.
And we work very hard with the constituent groups and ultimately with you as the board in the development of the criteria. What do you need right now at this particular time in the particular climate in which you are working as a board with your faculty, staff, student, and community leadership? That criteria list of what are the qualifications, what are the skills, what are the personalities of the individual that we believe will be successful. And so each step of the way, once those are established and you as a board have adopted them, that's what we use as we develop the questions, as we develop the reference checking, as we develop the outreach, to be able to say, this particular district is looking for someone who has extensive experience, and I'll now make this up, in business in order to have a balanced budget and a successful, stable financial. If that's one of the criteria, that's what we want to share with the people that we are recruiting and talking to about the position. So that isn't going to the kind of detailed testing that can sometimes occur with HR and the like, but it is our goal to match what you need and to bring the right people to you that you can then decide who is the right fit for us at this time.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention your board goals are fairly self-evident in terms of some of the larger goals that you need to have met. So I think that's a good place to start, but also digging deeper into other things that you feel are very important for your next superintendent president to have as they enter into this position.
Okay. And then I have one more question, that's all. So as we're going through these processes, we know there's lots of noise and voices that are out there that try to influence the process potentially. And sometimes people that may not meet minimum quals, I've known of searches that they get squeezed into the opportunity to interview. How do you help us make sure that doesn't happen?
Well, if they don't meet minimum quals, we won't even have them looked at by the committee. unless there's some policy that says that the committee needs to look at everyone who's applied. But in the past, when we've worked with human resources, if there isn't a policy or procedure that indicates everyone applied gets to get reviewed, then, we work with making sure that they are minimally qualified. That helps the search committee not have to go through the number of candidates.
And we will work very, very closely with HR, with human resources, when we look at all of the applications that come through. Like we say, we don't tell anybody or screen anyone out, but we'll look at them and then we'll come up with those that meet minimum qualifications only, so that when the search committee reviews those applications, they're only going to be looking at people who would be qualified to be your next president. Not necessarily the best, but they're going to be qualified to and they're going to meet minimum qualifications. Whatever it is that we decide, you folks decide with us to set as the minimum qualifications for this position. If people out there start causing trouble and say, oh, Ben Duran applied and he didn't get interviewed, and we'll take the heat. Because Ben Duran wouldn't be worth the darn for you anyway. But we'll take the heat. We will be happy to answer or respond to. We'll even take the heat from this district HR and say, you know what, if you have an issue with not being selected or not being moved forward, check with us and we'll deal with it. And we often do that with any of the other things, because once we set up the process, the process will move right along, and when we work with the search committee and they start looking at the applicants, and because not only will there be minimum qualifications, but you're also going to have desirable qualifications. And those desirable qualifications are going to say this, and this. And hopefully, those are the sorts of folks, the 10 or 12 or whatever the search committee wants to talk to, and then ultimately pare them down to the group that'll come to you folks.
And I think it's important to recognize that what you just raised is key for the board to remember all the way through. We will be coming to you to have you take action on the process, on the desired qualifications, on the calendar, the minimum qualifications. That's the time at which constituent groups and others would say, these are the minimum quals. We will have helped them develop. We may have some disagreement, which we would share with you. You have to think to yourself, is this minimum qualification we're adopting and putting in place going to create a political issue for us? And is it better to address it now or down the road? Anything from a minimum qual, meaning that HR is going to say, if they do not meet this, they will not be considered. So you could have a minimum qualification related to teaching in a classroom. We all have to decide, is that the experience you want from, or someone who has had experience only in a community college? Is that a minimum you want, and to eliminate a number of other people who may bring qualities that you'd like? So emphasis is, this will be your decision. We will assist you in making sure through the constituent groups the minimum quals are what we believe makes sense for this institution. And then you look those through and say, I'm not sure I agree that that should be a minimum. I think people without that can still serve us well. And then you will join us in saying this is what is best for us. And everyone will know right from the beginning, and we will stick with that and with your HR team.
Okay, that's very helpful, thank you. And I appreciate that you'll be working with our Vice President Galindo. I mean, sometimes we have applicants that they've left and signed something that says that they've agreed not to reapply at an institution. And so we want to make sure none of that gets slipped through either, so I appreciate it.
I have a few questions, and I'll go back to my fellow trustees, see if anybody else has any other questions. What's the largest search committee you've ever worked with?
Let me step forward.
You didn't say ideal, you said
The largest and not ideal was 24. And there have been several, been 21. The ideal, from our perspective, as Lisa said, we'll tell you good practices and practices that are not so good, things that we have found to be working well. Anything from 12 to 15, 12 to 18. 15 to 18 is typically what we're seeing. Once in a while they get down to 12, but that means they're not getting all the constituents probably. So probably 15 to 18-ish. But if you folks want more, we're happy to work with them.
Okay. And then, let's see, what's the most number of applicants you've ever gotten at a college before?
50, 60s.
Yeah, since I've been doing the searches, the largest I've had is 55 for CEO, superintendent, president, or chancellor's positions.
Those were qualified.
That's the number of applicants. When we went through minimum quals, they were down to 40.
Yeah, and polls really since the pandemic have kind of shifted a little bit. So typically what, the largest poll I ever dealt with was like 58. And then probably 40-something of them were qualified. Because there are the perennial folks whose names you're gonna see in every search almost. And those folks that don't meet the minimum quals or just don't make it. But I think now if we're getting 25 to 35, 40 applicants, that's what we're seeing in most searches, don't you think, Lisa? Yeah.
Okay. Let me go back to my fellow trustees. Trustee Perez, any other questions that you might have?
Something that came up from that, is there a minimum level of applicants that you guys try to bring forward? Or
As many as we can.
Okay.
But I think to your point, if we got to the point where we had such a small pool, we'd come to you and say, you know what? We either need to extend this thing or do something different, because I don't think we want a little tiny pool that just, but be honest with you, geographically and the reputation of this college, et cetera, I don't think we're gonna have, frankly, a problem with getting a pool, but we don't want 12 or 10 or whatever. That makes it tough.
Trustee Gonzalez? No question? Okay. Student trustee Robles?
A question did come up for me. In your previous work in managing some of these election processes, how successful have you been with really matching the applicants to the dedicated schools or areas where they are, where they win the election and they become the president or CEO?
That's a really good question. Thank you for that. Lisa, we actually keep our stats of how, when we place someone, how long they stay and that sort of thing. Lisa's our kind of like statistician.
I try to keep all this data. It's, in fact, if I look back, on average, we have 5 to 6 years average where they stay. Now, I will tell you, what's really important is things change at colleges. Different needs change. And it doesn't matter, that person may be very well qualified, but maybe not well qualified for that institution. So at a certain point, they need to move on, and that happens. And we understand that. There are other places where that individual might work out very well. But when you look at the particular candidates that are in their positions now, we always say that we don't choose those candidates. Ultimately, the board chooses that candidate. And you know what you need at the institution better than we do. We will listen to you. We will hear what your needs are, student perspective, board perspective, community perspective, faculty, staff perspectives, in terms of what they feel they need. Ultimately, the board makes that final decision. And with that, it is our goal that that person is the individual who is well qualified for that institution and may not be well qualified for another one, but this one at the time, when you bring them in and appoint them, that person's qualified.
And one of the services that we do provide, and was not necessarily specifically addressed in your RFP and request for a proposal, is that once the individual is selected, we are prepared to continue to work with you and the individual that you have hired to be the next superintendent president through a mix of coaching and retreats and support, because of the experience we have of knowing who can help and how we can assist as former successful executives within community colleges. So that's a part of our effort to assure the success of the individuals that you, the Board of Trustees, the person you select, we're going to help you or be prepared to help you make sure that person is successful.
Yeah, and I just would add that to that, those that 4 or 5 years on might move on. Some of them are simply moving up to larger districts, or they're moving into a chancellorship, or there's another opportunity that has come up for them. And then if there's been a change on the Board of Trustees and change of things, sometimes they go, hey, you know what, it's time for me to move on. But I can't think of anywhere we've placed someone who after a year or two are gone. Can you even recently? Not recently. Yeah, no, it's just, because if you do this right, and you work with the search committee, and you work with the constituent groups and the Board of Trustees, and you identify one of the big things, one of the really important things is going to be that profile. It's going to be that profile that we put out to the world and saying, College of the Desert is looking for this person, this kind of a person. If you're that person, you should apply. And when we do the screenings and that sort of a thing, hopefully the search committee is going to interview 10 or 12 of those people that meet those criteria. And if that's the case, then any number of them, hopefully, will step forward and they'll be good for you.
Thank you. Trustee Odom, nothing else?
No, I don't have any additional questions.
I have one additional question. I think it's one. And I think that our interim president, and I believe my colleagues would share this sentiment, but I can't speak for them. When you have an interim president and somebody that's well-known throughout the state, oftentimes you have difficulty with people applying for the position because they may perceive that individual is going to end up with the position. How do you deal with those perceptions when you're trying to work with encouraging people to apply? Because at the end of the day, we want the best candidate and the right candidate, et cetera. And I think all of us, including President Hope, feels that way.
That's a very good question, and that applies not only to interims, but to internals. Are there good internal people out there that everybody knows they're going to probably want to apply, et cetera, et cetera? What I tell people, I don't know what Lisa and Dave do, but what I tell people, I say, I don't know who's going to apply yet. I don't know if the interim is applying, may or may not. I'm going to call them and I'm going to see, but even if they were going to apply, I couldn't tell you. And because it's a wide open search, and the board has made it clear, it's a wide open search, to your point, that they might have an interim, and the interim's doing a good job, but they're looking for the very, very best person. And so the board has got an open search, and I've also tell them, and by the way, we would do the same thing with you folks. If you were telling us, we've got an interim we really like, but we've got to go through this process, so wink, wink, we've got to do a search, we would say, thank you, but we can't do that search for you, because it wouldn't be fair to that person, it wouldn't be fair to the people we would be recruiting, it just wouldn't be fair. So typically, when we do searches, we tell candidates it's wide open, and please apply. And there are a couple that I've talked to, I've told you that I've indicated, so we know that, such and such is there, but is it open? I said, absolutely open, going to apply. So there are folks out there that know, but at the same time, will be applying.
Also, your board policy says that it will be fair and open. So I'm going to emphasize that. But also, as I think Ben is correct, when somebody calls us and asks, is the interim going to be in the pool? Even if I knew she was, I'd say, I can't tell you that. Even if I did, I couldn't say a thing. You have an equal chance of being considered for the position as anyone else.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Any other questions from any board member? We'll do another round robin. I'd like to thank all of you for presenting today, and if there's anything you'd like to conclude with, feel free to.
Thank you, Dr. Stefan, we really appreciate it. And congratulations, by the way, on this boardroom. The last time you didn't have it. This is fabulous. The only thing I would mention to the IT people is that the camera, for some reason, is making me look like I have no hair. So I don't know if there's a flaw in this lens, but they might want to look at that. But with that, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So that was our first presentation. Now we will ask, where is it? AGB to step forward for their presentation. I could have the participants of that group. Please step forward to the little podium there. I'm sorry, there's no place to spread out anything that you might have brought, if you need that.
No, you were gonna, oh, okay. Oh, thank you, okay. Can I test it out real quick? Okay.
And let me remind the board, we have a presentation packet for this group as well. It's this one. Mhm. There it is, purple. Mhm.
You ready? Let us know when you're ready.
Okay, I think everybody's got the packet out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. It is our pleasure to be here with you, Chair Stefan, Vice Chair Gonzalez, and the rest of the Board of Trustees. It is our pleasure to join you today, and we are going to give you a brief presentation, and we are going to leave time for your questions, because that's really what we want to hear today, and address any questions you may have from AGB Search, because we really want to be your partner of choice in your search for your next president or superintendent. So on behalf of AGB Search, I'm Kim Bobby. I'm a principal with the firm, and I'd like to introduce my colleague here, Dr. Jean Jacobs. We would be your team from start to finish, and we also have a research associate, an executive research associate, who would also be a member of the team from start to finish. They're not here with us today, but we also bring the full force and effect of our entire AGB Search team to searches that we do nationally. So you would benefit from that, as well as the value add that we bring as affiliates of the Association of Governing Boards of Colleges and Universities, AGB, and we focus on working with boards and leaders to be the best leaders they can for colleges and universities around the nation. So that's just a little bit about us. You see our bios here, so I'm not going to go into that. But we look at your information, and I always put on the hat of a candidate. What do I want to know if I'm looking at an opportunity for College of the Desert? And I was happy to see on your website you have information that's easily accessible and answers a lot of questions that we know a good candidate is going to do their research before they even attempt to apply for the position. They're going to visit your website. They're going to try to do their homework and do that initial self-discernment about, is this opportunity something that I really want to pursue? And so we learned from your website and your strategic educational master plan. I really like the language when you said this is a navigational tool. This is a living document. This is a navigational tool to guide our work and help us remain confident that we are measuring key performance indicators and we are able to see where our outcomes are landing us. And then you can self-adjust for that. That's important for any good candidate to see, especially in these turbulent times in higher education. AGB just put out a publication for the top strategic issues for leaders in higher education, and it just came out a few months ago. And it's a document that really does talk about the climate in higher education right now and what good leaders need to do to be poised, to be effective at making sure that when you talk about centering equitable student success, you can really have the evidence that you're doing that. And so we also bring that to the table when I look at a lens and look at your website to see, you know, your master plan, your strategic plan. And while there's challenges afoot, and we heard your earlier budget presentation, that's not uncommon, but you do need leadership that has experience and that has overcome and has accomplishments to speak to, not just a vision for what they might do. At AGB, we have some accomplishments. We're a national search firm, and we have engagements all across the nation. We've worked with community colleges and community college districts across the nation. And so we not only have worked in California, but we bring to bear some of that knowledge base that we have from the lived experiences and seeing some of the similarities and the uniquenesses that community colleges are facing across the nation. We have done over 350 presidents and chancellor searches, and our completion rate is 95%. And over the past 5 years, we have really been focused on tracking our appointment of leaders from underrepresented groups, and that is totaling 63% now. And so that's something that we see is aligned with your values on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're intentional about elevating and really being able to articulate the importance of having leaders that are reflective of the student body and have the lived experiences to draw upon, not just what they've read about, but understanding the complexities. And so diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that we're committed to. In 2020, we developed a statement on justice, equity, and inclusion, and we've been committed to that. We're a national firm, and we have had backlash about it, but we are committed to that, and so we stand firm in our commitment, and we have made sure that I personally led the work with AGB across the association, not only AGB Search, but every area of AGB to stand up a diversity, equity, and inclusion framework that the entire association is working with to hold ourselves accountable. We can't talk the talk if we don't walk the walk. So we're committed to justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we have a commitment to making sure that we align with clients that feel the same way, and you are definitely representative of that kind of a commitment. And so we have an equitable approach to building an effective search pool, and these are some of the tools we bring forward. I personally do the anti-bias workshops and the search and selection process, and it comes from a practice that I have as a former chief diversity officer. But now I focus on, in anti-bias, I focus on listening to your own emotional intelligence to challenge the stories you tell yourself when you encounter people that are different from you, and where bias comes in unconsciously, and to help us all mitigate that bias, because we all still do it. So it's really important before the search committee gets access to the candidate pool to go through that personal self-reflection, to help bring those kinds of thoughts and examine, interrogate your feelings, and tell you, and then that can help you mitigate bias. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague here, Jean Jacobs, and she's going to talk a little bit about specifically our work with community colleges.
Thank you very much.
Advance this slide.
I got it. Thank you. And I might also add, as we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we integrate those practices throughout the entire process that we use at AGB, from beginning to end. It's about also working with the committee, but ensuring that the process is an equitable process as we go through. And as you can see on this slide, we've worked with a number of community colleges, and that includes community colleges and systems from across the nation. And we've also worked with some in the state of California. So, you know, we're very pleased to have this opportunity, and having spent 40 years in community colleges, this work is very important to us. We understand the mission, we understand some of the challenges today, and we understand the opportunities to continue to, I think, improve on some areas that we know we can as community colleges. When we think about our process, and this slide really does reflect the entire search process. Let me start by sharing that we generally look at a process taking between 5 and 6 months to complete. Initially, these are the phases that you will see as a part of our process, and we're going to start with understanding more about you. We want to make sure that we're well prepared as we move into the search, and we call that the pre-search phase. During that phase, we're going to take the opportunity to meet with you, but also meet with internal and external constituents, because we want to understand the qualities and qualifications that you're looking for, the opportunities and challenges that you're facing. We sometimes call that the leadership agenda. During this period, we will be working with you to develop a timeline for the search. We'll take into consideration your academic calendar and other goals you may have as you think about the search. For instance, when do we want to have a new president on board? We also, during this time, will do a number of listening sessions and a pre-search survey. All of this input we do to make sure that we can develop what's called a leadership profile. That profile is considered our North Star. It guides the entire search process. And we would want to work with your marketing team to develop that particular profile. In doing so, that will prepare us to then launch the search, if you will. So when we get to phase 2, we also develop a very aggressive recruitment strategy, which is multifaceted, and it will include a number of steps and activities so that we can recruit across the nation, actually. And we'll be doing that with our networks. We do LinkedIn Pro. We have an aggressive outreach strategy that we use, just to name a few things. But in addition to that, as we begin to build the pool, we pre-screen the candidates for the position. We will be the primary contact for those given candidates. And this is a time in which we would also start looking at other tools that the committee will need as it does its work. And I should mention that a thread throughout our process is communication, ongoing communication, that we're here to support the committee from beginning to end. And in each one of these phases, we're going to be actively involved. We're going to be present. We're going to develop many of the materials that the search committee will need, because we want them to focus on the selection of semifinalists to recommend to the board. When we get to phase 3, the committee will have access to our secure website, and they will begin to review the applications on file that have been pre-screened for them. But in addition to that, I will tell you, at this phase, we also will be working with the committee to develop an assessment matrix to help them assess those candidates. So it's a very important step in the process. We then can help facilitate the selection of the semifinalists for the position with the search committee, and we'll be doing that. And we begin to initiate our initial due diligence, which is the research, the background checks, the on-list reference calls, and all of those things that we need to do to make sure that you have as much information as you need about any given candidate. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kim. That's just a highlight. There are many, many steps and phases, and we'll be happy to answer questions about that.
Okay, thank you, Jean. So as we move into conducting the interviews, that's the next stage. And of course, that's going to be grounded on the questions that we have helped the search committee develop and the rubric. But we also work with the search committee early on to make sure that we know that your bylaws may require certain members of constituency groups to be on the search committee. And so we want to make sure everyone is prepared to be on a presidential search committee. We want to work with your HR department. If you have an orientation for your, a screening process, whatever it is, we want to make sure that that's done up front. So when your search committee comes to the table, they're poised. They know the time commitment that it takes to be on a presidential search. They know what's going to be expected of them in a presidential search, because we don't know that, based on if it comes from constituency groups, there may be a rotation process or some kind of screening process. We want to make sure up front, early on, before we get to conducting interviews, making sure that they have the most optimal orientation to the process, to make sure when they get to the point of conducting interviews, they have the discernment and they understand the why the questions are going to be asked. We help them develop questions to provide the information that they want. The profile is a North Star. That's what your candidate pool spoke to. So you don't want to have a bait and switch, right? They spoke to what you said you needed. Their cover letter, their letter of interest is going to speak to who they are and their why. Good candidates. Good candidates help you see why you want to bring them for the semifinalist interview. But the search committee also needs to understand that as well. So we're committed to having that two-pronged approach to the why. Helping the committee, when we get to those interviews, the questions are developed to say, what do we want to hear from these candidates? And that's how you develop your question. You don't want to get to the end of the interviews and say, well, these candidates didn't address X, Y, and Z, but we didn't ask them. So you want to make sure the questions really get at the information you need in the interviews. They'll all be asked the same questions. Every candidate's answer is going to be different. That's your opportunity for unique follow-up, because we know that's an important, you want to make sure the information that you glean from these candidates is rich enough to make sure that you have the opportunity to truly see who's going to be your best next leader. So those interviews, conducting those interviews is that next piece of the puzzle. And that's a really important part because that's where you're going to start to narrow your pool. And you want to make sure that, these candidates can speak into the profile, but also what you're looking for and how they match with what the institution is looking for. Who the next president of the College of the Desert is depends on those interactions, when it gets down to the personal. And after those interviews, we will work with you to develop and we do even further due diligence as you narrow the pool to a group of finalists. Then that's when we do the background court, nexus, lexis, that kind of thing, off-list references. Now, in our off-list process, we let the candidates know we're going to go off-list. We're going to ask references that you have chosen for names of other individuals that we can speak with. Because it's not a gotcha. Anybody in leadership position, they'll ruffle some feathers along the way. So we share that list with the candidate. We're going to call these additional people. But it's really about being honest, and at this point, they should know that that's going to happen. So that's also a part of that process. After we work with you to get all of those pieces of the puzzle in order and you bring your finalists to campus, we can be there however you want us to be. When I did the search recently at Pasadena, they had us there to work with the public presentations and help sort through questions to have an unbiased person assessing the questions that the candidates got. That was just something they wanted, and we were happy to do that. And so then you want to appoint a new leader. You want to make sure that in that appointment, you have all the information you need, the due diligence. There is a survey that we do. We provide a survey for the candidates when they do the campus visits. Just a 3-question survey for anybody who's engaged with the finalists. Pros, cons, concerns. Strengths, weaknesses, concerns. That is something that is another opportunity to create that inclusive process with the stakeholders of College of the Desert, to make them feel that and see and get that experience of putting their own thoughts to paper and letting you know what they think. So this process is inclusive. We're inclusive on purpose, and we really do work to help make sure that next leader is really getting the exposure they need. And when we talk about that exposure, we're also talking about the transition. We believe it's important to stand up a transition committee with intention long before the search ends. You want a key individual in that role, somebody that's respected and can be the hub for every member of that transition committee, because we know that you have to have internal stakeholders as well as external stakeholders on that transition committee. So you want a person that can have the kind of leadership and be accessible and be intentional about that transition committee role. And that could mean many times taking something off of someone's plate to make sure that they can be centered on the transition, setting up the key stakeholders the president superintendent needs to meet with, populating that calendar early on to make sure that there's no side steps when this new leader comes on board, doing everything you can to make sure they can hit the ground with a positive start. And because we know people have short memories and people's feelings get hurt easily. So if one group is left off of the calendar early on, that can create all kinds of ripple effects. So that transition committee needs to be intentional, it needs to be diverse, and it needs to make sure that once a new president comes on, they can then partner and make any kind of adjustments based on, if they're a person that's regional and well-known, or if they're someone who's new to the state of California. So that transition is something that we stay with, we coach, we transition. That's a part of our high-touch brand at AGB Search, and we make ourselves available with intention for at least a year for the new president and superintendent, because it's important, and that's really a part of our retention strategy. So, it's a turbulent time in higher education. None of us have a crystal ball, but we bring to bear so much from what we're doing with AGB, with boards and presidents and leaders across the nation, So we can bring that to bear when a new president is stepping into that role in the transition and dealing with the critical issues facing higher education, both locally and nationally and regionally. So this is a slide about the transition process. As I said, we talked about the preparation, this transition plan, who's going to be meeting with the next president, and the outgoing president's departure. You want to make sure you honor that person with the significant leadership contributions that they made. And I know you have someone in the role that's interim, and from what I can read, she brings a rich background in higher education and has done some great things. And so you want to definitely acknowledge that departure, and then prepare the institution for the new president, and create those kinds of moments for that exposure and the relationship building that needs to happen. And then, of course, the relationship with the board is key. If this president is new to the area, understanding the board, getting to know the board members, the board chair, that essential relationship, that cadence of meeting with the board president is so important. That understanding of priorities is so important. Those are changing constantly. And so that transition support is really important, and we can bring to bear a lot of tools and resources that we have on hand. Jean, do you want to say anything else about transition?
The only thing that I'll add in the interest of time is that we know it's critically important to the success of a new president. In the first, as you look at research, if you think about the first 90 days, if you will, 90 to 180 days, you can somewhat determine the success of that president. The transition is in place. If a transition is in place, it certainly helps that president to have a positive impact early on and be successful. And so that's, I think, a key point. As Kim mentioned, there's a relationship component, relationship building with the board, critically important, but understanding the business matters of the institution, at the status, understanding the need to engage with various groups, your governance groups, students. And in addition to that, I would add the hospitality needed for a new president. That president will be bringing a family, possibly. And if so, there will be a need to assist, possibly, with that effort. Schools, housing, good doctors, those things that sometimes we take for granted when a new president comes on board, if that president is not currently in the community. So those are some of the things that a transition plan should be considering as you go through the process.
And one more slide.
Okay.
Okay. And then just finally on our side, we just wanted to let you know that we're committed to your success, because that's our success. They're inextricably linked. And so we are supportive of excellence in both the client and the candidate care. We do have, as we talked about earlier, we have exposure nationally. So we know that there are a lot of candidates out there that would be interested in the opportunity that are not from the region. But we would want to make sure that we help them discern if this is the right opportunity, because California is unique, right? Just like every state. So we have those discussions with potential candidates to talk about, the why, and why California, why College of the Desert. And so, we have a national record of successful placements around the nation, and that is something that we are very proud of, and our branding is we're very high touch and relational. We've been affiliated with AGB over a decade now, and I know that's our 10-year mark is young, but we have a track record of significant growth, and that says something about us, because we are, I've been with the firm since 2017, and we're experiencing tremendous growth, and we're intentional about who we bring to the team, because we want to make sure we maintain that culture of high touch, relational, and we have been able to do that. So with that, I want to say thank you, and we love to answer your questions now.
Okay, great, thank you. If I could start with my trustee to the far left over here, Trustee Perez, do you have any questions, please?
No questions really on my end. The very impressive presentation, really well polished. It's really good. I'm really impressed. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Gonzalez?
No, likewise, I share those sentiments. I mean, everything was like you answered all the questions that I could have possibly asked you. So very, very well put together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to go over here to my far right, Student Trustee Robles.
No questions. I just wanted the use of data and research was awesome. It's good to hear that there's some sort of backing to the information, and the slides were very clear in stating what you have done and what you will do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Trustee Oden?
Well, I have questions. But first, I want to commend you on the transition committee. I think that is an incredible concept. And perhaps it's because you're women, to have that kind of sensitivity and insight to figure out if someone's coming in, what they might need. That's tremendous. But now to my question.
Okay.
Do you see any logistic challenges or barriers to conducting this search specifically in California in terms of recruitment?
Oh, absolutely not. We're working on searches in California currently. Jean is working with,
Yes, I'm working on a search with, I think it's the City College of San Francisco. We both conducted the Foothill de Anza search. We did not have any issues recruiting.
and I just did the Pasadena City College. You're gonna announce the finalists. Well, they announced the finalists already, but the contract in July. I'm from California, so this is home. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, so I know the state. And so, no, there's no logistical. Our firm we're around the nation. We have consultants around the nation. Right. And we draw on a large, rich candidate pool based on our contacts with our other colleagues as well.
How involved are you as individuals in the interview process? Your role, how do you see it, and what kind of input do you give to the board?
Well, we don't participate in the interview process. We don't. The specific interviews are conducted by the search committee. We observe, though. We're present for every interview.
So you're present but uninvolved?
Yeah, we're
observers.
We're observers. Because you know what happens? Many times the candidates call us and say, could you give me some feedback on my interview? And so we're able to give them some feedback on their performance in the interview. And so that's really something that happens quite frequently. People, they want to know how they can do better, or they want to know how they did, or just anything that we observed. And so that's why it's important for us to be present for all the interviews. But we don't ask the candidates questions. Now, we do, as we talked about, help the committee develop a set of questions for both the semifinalists and finalists. Because remember, we want to make sure you're getting the information that you need. So that's where we are involved. But as far as personally with the candidate interview, we're observers.
Okay, that covers my questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've got several questions.
Okay.
Okay.
They're redundant. They've all heard them already. But a question I have is, we do have an interim president, and she may or may not be a candidate for this position. And you've done a lot of, well, I should have said welcome and thank you for traveling so far to visit us here at COD. I think the interim president, as well as my colleagues and the college community and our community at large, we want the best candidates. Mm-hmm. And we don't want there to be a perception that it's a predetermined outcome. Right. So how do you address that when you're recruiting candidates to consider applying for a position with that type of situation?
You want to take that?
I'll be happy to take that. When we have candidates apply, we often hear Is there an internal candidate? Is there a favorite in the pool? And we basically do not respond to that. We talk specifically about that candidate who's talking to me. I'm asking that candidate, are you interested in this position? Are you clear about the qualities and qualifications necessary to do this presidency? And if so, you need to apply, because we understand this is an open search. So you need to make that decision. And for the most part, I will tell you, we've had candidates who've asked those questions, and there have been internal candidates, and they have applied. The external candidates have applied. Oftentimes, they'll get the job. My experience is it is difficult sometimes for an internal candidate because you know the candidate, it can work either way. So I think for us, it's important that we make sure candidates understand the position, the importance of that position, what you're looking for in your next president to move this institution forward. And that's the person you want. And most of the time, if they're really, really great, they're going to apply. They're going to take that chance if it's something that they really believe they should pursue.
And also, we take that opportunity to remind the candidate, this is a confidential search.
Correct.
And no candidate's information is exposed until they become, if they become a finalist. And so we're not at liberty to discuss anybody who is in the pool.
That's right.
Good. In your materials, you had a section that dealt with, I guess I call them instruments, but predictive indexes, and one of them was behavioral and cognitive assessments. Can you talk to me about those a little bit?
Sure. We offer that up as an additional service if you'd like. We have team members that are trained in doing the assessment. And we like to say it's not a predictor of success. It's a developmental tool. So it can show some areas where development might be an opportunity for these candidates for the board to then wrap into, if they want coaching or, ways that they could be the most optimal president. So we look at it as a developmental tool, as information, and many of us have taken it as well. We're transitioning from the predictive index to the Hogan instrument. Are you familiar with the Hogan? So we're going to be doing that, and I'm getting trained as an assessor of that. We have a diverse team also that will be looking at those assessments. We really want to make sure that we have different perspective and lenses looking at these tools because they're laced with bias. And so we really want to make sure that we challenge ourselves and not just having, only one or two individuals looking at those assessments, looking at the outputs from those assessments.
Great. So I've experienced this. That's why I always have to ask it. Sometimes you'll get a lot of applicants, and I'm assuming you do the screening on the front end, but I have been in a situation before where a candidate didn't meet minimum quals and made it all the way to the finalist position, and then ultimately became the president. So how do you deal with situations where someone may not meet minimum quals, but they may have a large support base that tries to influence the process?
Well, that's where the beauty of your profile and the pre-work you've done, we'll do with the listening sessions, determining those criteria, and those are not moving targets. So, you don't want to have someone sidestep what you said and what your constituency said you were looking for in your next president, because that really does diminish the confidence in the search. And so if a person's not qualified, this is not the right opportunity for them, because you as a board have that fiduciary responsibility to make sure that the right candidate that can do the job for College of the Deserts gets the job. And it really does have to be based on keeping the students at the center. I know that that's what you say in your strategic plan, student-centeredness. And so you really want to keep that forefront when we look at candidates and people that might know someone, might want to get in the pool. We've seen that happen. But, you know, and then that's why it's so important to have the search committee up front be oriented to make sure that they don't have that kind of influence creep in. Help them stay with the North Star, with the profile, and making sure that we can all use the same assessment tool, the same rubric. And if somebody doesn't meet the qualifications, that's their responsibility to make sure that that person, but we would say that this person, you know, does not meet the qualifications. We can do that screening on the front end. So the pool would only have people in the pool that met those minimum qualifications. Even if they came to you as a board member and said, you know, X, Y, Z, because we know that happens because people have relationships. But we want to, our commitment is to stay true to the opportunity that we advertise nationally. And these are very busy, very engaged leaders in their work, and we don't want to be a part of having someone sidestep that process that's just not qualified to be in the role, because too much is at stake for College of the Desert to have that happen.
So have you been looking at potential candidates that you would recruit for this position?
Well, I would say this. We have a lot of experience with community colleges, and we know a lot of leaders that are looking and some that aren't, that we would reach out to. But the first thing we like to do is learn more about you through the listening sessions. We don't want to make assumptions yet about who would be a good candidate. We want to hear from what's currently on the hearts and minds of the College of the Desert stakeholders before we would make that kind of an assumption. Because really, this is a challenging time, and you want to get it right. And so we don't want to assume that we have the right people, but we do have a large database of people that we have worked with, and I dare say there are probably some strong candidates, especially from some of the searches we've done most recently, that we would reach out to once we learn and hear your story.
Yeah, if I could add, you know, that's where the profile is critically important to us. We will be also asking for nominations. We know there are passive candidates, those folks who are not necessarily looking right now. And we are going to really consider those folks, especially if they meet the qualities and qualifications in the profile. So I would add to what Kim is saying that while we may not have actively started getting, you know, inquiries about this particular position, that does not mean people are not looking. And once the profile is up and out, that does not mean people won't start contacting us. And we won't start aggressively recruiting, because our strategy is pretty aggressive. We do a number of things to build the pool, and it's a pool uniquely for your position.
All right, and can you describe how you work with our vice president and her staff of human resources when you go through a process like this?
Yes, absolutely. We would definitely lean on the expertise and the wisdom of your HR department with the preparation of, you know, the documentation on the job description, making sure that the profile and the job description are in sync, and making sure that all your processes and bylaws are followed to the T, and we need your guidance on that, and also your communications and marketing folks when we do get the profile ready. You know, your voice has to come through that profile. And so we want to make sure what we glean from the listening sessions, that HR and your marketing and communications people get a chance to make sure they massage that and edit that to make sure it's the College of the Desert's voice. And then the preparation of the search committee, as I mentioned earlier. If there's practices that HR has in place, for instance, if search committee members need to have gone through EEO training before they become a search committee member, making sure that, you know, we make sure that HR, you know, we're building that timeline in to make sure that happens. Whatever has to happen on the HR side, we need to make sure that's built into the timeline for the search committee as far as orientation and things like that.
Okay, great. That concludes my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask some questions before I go around robin again here. First off, I'll tell you, I'm really, really impressed. I'm really impressed that you have an anti-bias workshop, and you're so aware of the unconscious biasness of individuals, I mean, we try to be unbiased, but, there is the unconscious that, people are unaware of. So I'm really grateful that you have that. A couple of questions. What's the largest committee you've ever worked with? Search committee?
For me, 27 people, because, and that was based on the bylaws for the institution and these stakeholder groups, the constituency groups, the governance groups. They had 10 governance groups. And so, yeah, it was, I think that's my largest, Jean.
Mine is about 25, same issue. Wanted to make sure you included all of the governance groups. So, yes, we've worked with large committees.
Okay. And then what's the largest pool that you've ever had of applicants?
Well, I can give you a recent number.
Okay.
Because, we're completing up a search, and it is for president, and we have 75 candidates.
Okay.
And one I'm working with has 69 candidates.
69. Okay.
Now, they're all not equally qualified.
Right. Yeah.
And we do have people that we call the frequent flyers. They
show up.
They show up.
They will be in our C folder.
Right, but what we do is, and speaking of that, this is something that we offer, not that you have to take us up on it, but we know that the search committee is a group of very busy people. And we do the pre-screening, and we can do the ABCs, I call them. The A's are the strongest, most competitive. The B's are competitive, but less so, and the C's don't appear to be competitive, even though they might have met the minimum requirements. But the committee sees everything. So, and we encourage them to read everything. But if you want to know who we think are the most competitive, they're in the A folder. We just try to support the committee with that process. But once again, we don't put our thumb on the scale. We just say, please read them all, because I have seen people pull from the B folder that have gotten the job.
Correct.
Okay, and then you didn't mention it, but I'm assuming that you would have forums for the finalists.
Yes, we would help. We would give you a draft schedule for the forums, for the town hall, for who the finalists should be meeting with. Typically a day long for each of them, based on your board meetings, when this has to happen, so you could vote and so forth, and how the board would engage interviewing the finalists. So we would build a template based on your schedule, your board schedule, to make sure that you will have the opportunity to have that shaped most optimal for the board to get the information that they need, especially those feedback surveys that come from the campus constituency groups. We want to make sure that you're able to see all that input before you make your decision.
Okay, I'm going to go through my trustees again, ask if anyone has any additional questions. None. Any additional questions? No? Trustee Kinman? No. Okay, I want to thank you very much for your presentation. Very, very informative, very, very well presented. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you to, what do we have them do? Have a seat at least? What? Okay, so if you could have a seat.
Well, we just want to thank you for this opportunity. It would be our pleasure to partner with you and help you find the right leader for the College of the Desert for now and in the future. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and my fellow trustees, having heard from both search firms, we're going to now accept a motion to approve either firm along with the recommended action as presented. As a reminder to the board, we need to have a motion on the floor before we can deliberate, and deliberation can include both firms. Okay, so do I have a motion to approve a firm along with the recommendation as presented?
So moved.
Well, wait a minute, we need a recommendation as to a firm, is that correct?
I thought we were discussing both. Sorry, I must have missed.
Well, we can't discuss until we have a motion on the table, correct?
Yes, and even if a specific firm is named in the motion, the deliberation can be a back and forth between.
Back and forth about both firms, and then we will take a vote, and then if we need to, we will have a second motion.
I would motion AGB search.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor for AGB search.
And I will
for-
second.
What was that? And a second. Okay, so at this time, we can start discussion. If anybody would like to volunteer to start. I'll start over here. I'll just go the same order I've been doing this round robin thing, if that's okay.
Well, both presentations were great, but I found AGB to be particularly really impressive. Since we got their RFP, I just thought that they had the most extensive proposal. In my opinion, they've done a lot of really impressive work as it relates to diversity and diversifying different college campuses. They're significantly much more expensive than the other firm. Almost, I think it's double the price, but I think it's worth it to spend a little bit more money or spend more money and make sure that we get the best firm and get the best pool of candidates. I think since we're making an investment here, obviously we want to, this next superintendent president is probably gonna be we're hoping it's the next president for a while. So I think might be beneficial to fork over some money. I found him to be particularly very impressive, answered every one of our questions.
Okay, thank you. Trustee, or do you want to say anything for the other firm or at this time or not?
No, I mean,
Okay.
I appreciate the PPL's presentation as well. We do have some familiarity with them. We've worked with them in the past, and so I do appreciate that. I think they understand the landscape and stuff like that. They worked with more California community colleges, but the work that AGB has done has been very extensive, and it's throughout different, levels of higher institutions, universities, community colleges throughout the nation. I just feel like they can, bring a wider pool of more qualified candidates, and I think that's basically what I'm basing my decision off of.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to give you that opportunity in case you didn't feel it was there. Okay, Trustee Gonzalez, anything you'd like to say about?
Yes, I was, sitting here and listening to both and deliberating in my mind. And I know that we have worked with PPL, and I think we've worked well with them, and I think they brought us great candidates. As you know, we had so many to read through. I went back, and I see the list here. Again, a lot of work in California. I didn't know this, but I even see that apparently they were the ones that placed Dr. Garcia at Mount San Antonio. When I was looking at this, and so I do think we work well with them. But to be quite honest, when you look at the proposals and even the presentation here today, AGB they were shiny. And I know, of course, you always have to be mindful, right, when something looks, but they have all of their, information and documentation here to support that presentation that they gave to us. And and hearing them mention that they do have ties to California. I don't remember their names right now. I have to meet you a few times before I remember your name, but I know they, she mentioned she was born and raised in Los Angeles, so that made me feel a little better that she at least understands California, because we are a very different state. And I'm proud of us being a very different state for a lot of different reasons. But to be honest, just putting them side by side and having them here, there was no way that I couldn't say AGB for me, But again, I do appreciate, PPL. And again, I know they're a great firm. I know we work with them. But for me, this one just, it was outstanding. The packet, the presentation, everything, all the support systems, the way they're designed and developed, and I'm just very impressed.
Okay. Student Trustee Robles?
I just want to say and kind of tag along to what has been mentioned, where their presentation for AGB seemed a lot more modern, and right off the get-go, they presented research, and it was very clear on their presentation to see where they have worked and what they have done. They may not be so like rooted in California, but to start in a different environment and move into another land is just might be part of their process. It is nice to see there were two women of color who are going to be very clearly representative of what the college is going for, and just hearing them speak very clearly and effectively on their mission was pretty powerful.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Oden?
Yeah, I agree with Trustee Perez. When we were going through the RFP, I thought, their work was really very, very good. But their answers were really great. And one of the things that stood out to me was the question that Trustee Kinnaman asked, what about who are you looking for in California? And the response, well, until we talk to you and find out what you want, we're not, and what you need, we're not looking at people. That was really very important for me to hear. So, and the fact that, they are women and women of color, I see as a plus as well. Agree.
Okay, Trustee
But-
Kinnaman? Oh,
But the organization and their presentation was just really.
Trustee Kinnaman?
I think we're going to hear a lot of the same. I concur with Trustee Perez's assessment. We've got two firms, and I believe each of them could successfully find us the right person to be the next superintendent president, and hopefully for a very long time. I'll acknowledge that, one's half the cost of another, but when you're dealing with presidential search, that I usually weight that less, and I think a lot of that is just based on where one of the firm's main office is in California, and then the other ones, it probably adds to the costs of trying to travel and hotels and those things. So with both of them, clearly great track records, and I was happy with the responses from both firms, and I don't think with either one of them that we could go wrong. So I feel pretty positive that we're going to come out of here with a good.
Thank you. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background. As you know, I've been here for 25 years. You probably know that I've been on chaired two presidential searches in the past. One of them, we had I think the largest committee that has ever been had on a presidential search. It was like 35 people. That's not a good thing. But I was happy to hear that they said that it was up to the institution, the size of that committee. Not that, I would ever want to do a 35-person search again. That was like, you can imagine, it went on forever. Also, that time we had over 150, more than 150, I don't remember what the exact number was, candidates that were qualified. And so I was glad to hear that they had dealt with large numbers before. I also liked the way they presented that if there was a large group, that they could help the committee by positioning them into an ABC group to make it a little bit easier, but that they would still encourage the committee to look at all the applicants, because that is critical. Sometimes you get somebody in that C group that really just stands out in the end, and they might actually be the best fit. So I was really grateful for that. I really loved the fact that they had the DEI training for the committee, and that they looked at unconscious bias, because it is something that, people, individuals don't realize. We all have an unconscious bias, and unless we really are trained in that or attend workshops in that, it's real easy for that to slip in. Okay, and so I was glad to hear that they try to work with that with the groups, because sometimes we don't know that things are happening that way. Also, the way that their full presentation, I heard them mention several times the North Star, like, they were looking for that special someone for the college that's just for you. And to me, that meant a lot. Yes, we've worked with PPL before, and I thought they did a great job for us. But I think, when I first looked at it, I looked at the money and I thought, wow. But, when you're talking about the president of your college, you want to have the very, very best. You want to have the best at the top. You want to have the best overall. And expense should not be considered when you're considering that. So I'm leaning for the AGB search as well. And if anybody has anything else to share, please let me know. Otherwise, if not, I think we can call the question. There's no objection. So I'll do a roll call vote.
Trustee Stefan?
Yes.
Sorry, can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
I want to make sure there's a recommended motion for this item. And I just wanted to clarify if the motion on the floor was to make take the recommended action. And I know that Trustee Gonzalez made the motion with AGB, which was seconded by
it was
Trustee
Trustee Perez, I believe, wasn't it?
Trustee Oden.
Was it Trustee?
Trustee Oden.
I second, yeah.
You seconded. It was
Just want to make sure.
Trustee Gonzalez made the motion.
You made the motion, and was seconded over here. Yes.
Yep. I just want to make sure that it was the recommended motion inserting AGB. As
AGB, yes.
The firm of choice. Okay, thank you.
That's what we will be voting on, AGB for the search. Search for our presidential search group.
Madam Chair, if I could just for the record clarify, the motion on the floor as it was stated is a motion to approve AGB along with the recommendations as presented. Just wanted to state that clearly for the record.
Okay.
Along with?
Referencing the recommended action and the additional components.
Yeah, both, okay.
With the simple addition of AGB as the named search firm.
The named search firm, yes. Okay. Okay, so that is the motion. Thank you for the clarification. If there's no objection, we'll have the vote at this time. No objection, okay. So we'll start with student trustee Robles, your, what do we call it? Advisory vote, please. I think it's an advisory vote. Is it or your vote? Yeah, okay, I think it's an advisory vote.
We're speaking, and then this is in terms of AGB, correct?
AGB for our search.
I vote aye.
Okay, thank you. It's Trustee Perez?
Aye.
Trustee Oden?
Aye.
Trustee Kinnaman?
Aye.
Trustee Gonzalez?
Aye.
And myself, I'll vote aye, and the motion is carried unanimously. So AGB will be our search firm, and along with the recommendation